right, welcome to another edition of 42 Stories Anthology Presents. I am your host, Bam, and today we have a special guest, one of the award winners from the book. Welcome.
Hi.
All right, and her name is Lindy Greaves. She is the winner of the runner-up award for the romance category. Lindy, would you like to give your story a read for the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, of course. You'll have to just excuse me while I turn and read it from the side.
No worries.
So this is Remnants of a Dangerously Delicious Dinner. Evening. She licks her lips, savouring the taste of her departed lover. Ruminating. Good sex. Wonderful meal. Welcome change from the usual reflection. She sighs, a promise blooming in her abdomen. She never asked his name. Delicious, perhaps. The web sways.
You know, I remember reading your story and loving it right away, but hearing you read it is like twice as good. I'm really fortunate to be able to hear it, and so will the people watching later on.
Oh,
So,
thank
yeah,
you.
you're excellent at reading that story. I didn't really see the end coming when I'd read it, and then I had to reread it and go, "Oh, that's what's going on here. That's quite a romance." Yeah. But yeah, thank you for sharing your words with the book, and I can't wait for the audiobook. Hopefully, they do it justice like you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, and thanks for the runner-up nomination.
Well, I didn't actually do that. Some special judges did, and we're also interviewing them. Well, I am interviewing them. So who's we in that case? Unless the viewers count. So yeah, let's go over your biography. I'm going to go ahead and give that a read, and let me know if I say anything wrong. Lindy Greaves has ghost written as a career criminal and a missionary nun. Her short fiction has appeared in various publications, including the Sunday People, Zentic Record, Drabble Dark Anthology, the Norwegian American Art Post magazine, and the Brazenville V. She's a wife and mom. All right. I just couldn't say Brazenville quite right, but
Yeah. I want to say Bronzeville, maybe, but
yeah, I just can't see it that well. I think it's my yeah, but you're right. So
cool.
speaking of locations, where are you right now?
So I'm in the UK and I live basically right in the middle. So it's Leicestershire, but if you stuck a pin in the middle of the UK, that's about where I am, about as far from the sea as I can be.
Okay, I actually visited the UK in 2019 and
Yeah.
went to London and Liverpool, where a buddy of mine insisted I go to a real pub with him because in Japan they don't have real pubs; they have fake ones, according to him. So we got to go to a real pub. I saw this Beatles stuff, but the real memorable stuff was like the small towns. I went to what is it? To Stonehenge and Bath. Have you been over there?
Yeah, I'm actually going down that way tomorrow. I'm going camping with my family. So yeah, that'd be fun. But yeah, no, we're quite a small town where I am. Yeah, pros and cons.
The crazy thing is that I was on this bus when I saw Stonehenge, and the first thing this other American said when he got off the bus is, "What a tourist trap!" And I'm like, "What are you expecting, man? They're stones."
Yeah.
It just surprises me.
Yeah, they've had a bit of controversy recently because protesters have been decorating them, and that's kind of frowned upon by many.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your writing space because I'm curious about that. Where is your writing space?
Yeah, I mean, multiple places. I'm sure, like a lot of writers, I I do the bulk of my work at a laptop in usually where I'm sitting actually, this kind of spare bedroom come study. So I do a lot of my editing. I generally write a lot on a laptop, but I think when I'm starting stories or kind of coming up with ideas, I do a lot of writing. I have a notebook and and a pen. I like writing with a pen, a black pen, um, and a nice notebook. And that can be anywhere. It's like filling time, traveling. But I've rarely I rarely would show or share a story until I've probably edited it 2 or 3 times, 4 or 5 times more likely. And generally that would happen after typing up on a laptop. I'm not great with having music playing while I'm writing either, so it tends to be door shut and fairly quiet when I'm doing it, unless I'm listening to people's conversations and making notes on a train or whatever it is, like I'm sure other people have done. Yeah, it's not just me.
No, it's very Hemingway of you.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
So speaking of Hemingway, what kind of drinks do you like?
So, yeah, I'm not very good with caffeine actually. So, even if I have like a latte coffee, milky coffee, I will come home and start talking, and my husband will say, "You've had a coffee, haven't you?" How can you tell? So I'm really sensitive to caffeine, and then sometimes I have like a drop afterwards, and like I feel my heart kind of going racing and then quiet. So yes, I tend to drink rooibos tea or redbush tea, so naturally caffeine-free tea, with milk, which is probably a very English thing to add to your rooibos tea. And I normally have something a little bit naughty with it if available.
Oh, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
writing that down because what you described is exactly what happens to my partner when she drinks coffee. And she likes tea, but only caffeine free. So I'm writing down the type you drink to give to
Yeah,
her.
yeah, it was nice. From South Africa, rooibos.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay, great. Thank you for the recommendation. She's going to be happy. She's always
Welcome.
looking for tea without caffeine. Yeah. Great. So let's move on to sweets. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I'm probably not a big sweet person exactly, but I like something sweet with my cup of tea, but I'm more of a dark chocolate, rich chocolate. But for me, what's really important is the ethics of it. So I will always choose fair trade chocolate. I have one of my favorite brands is called Divine, and it's owned by farmers. So it's kind of better than fair trade because they get a cut of all of the profits, which is really nice because a lot of cocoa is grown in countries where there's slavery, there's kids working in it. So I feel like every time I eat this Divine chocolate, I am benefiting the planet, benefiting. Yeah, so it's like guilt-free eating. I highly recommend it.
You raise a really good point about chocolate. Recently, though, I guess for health reasons, I try to not eat sugar. So I'm finding other recipes like, do you know you can make ice cream out of bananas? Just
No,
bananas, or I guess
wow,
bananas, right? And yeah, you could do it. You just put it in the freezer for 4 hours, and then you put it in a food processor, and you have ice cream. You add a little
no,
milk, and you'll have delicious ice cream. I think maple syrup's good in it with some milk. Some people recommend almond milk, but yeah, try it
yeah,
out. It's a
yeah,
great
yeah, okay,
alternative
yeah,
to sweets and no
yeah. I
sugar.
think my kids would definitely like to try that.
Let's talk about food and drinks.
Yeah, okay. So I we'll start with drinks. So on a Friday, during COVID lockdown, my husband introduced bar night on a Friday. And it was just to kind of make the end of the week feel a little bit different. So, I might have a gin and tonic or something, and the kids will have a fizzy drink because we tend to not let them have fizzy during the week. And we don't cook. We eat crisps and nuts and breadsticks, and maybe peel some carrots for a little bit of health, cucumber batons and things. So bar nights became quite a focus in lockdown, and when COVID kind of sort of released us from its talons, we kept bar night. Bar night was one of the the good things from that pandemic time. So I really look forward to Fridays, and we have we play music, and and I don't cook, and we just eat rubbish really, and then we'll watch a film together. So I mean that's not really proper food, I suppose, but that's a kind of a nice family time of the week that we're trying to protect. It's getting harder as my kids get a bit older and want to be playing their computer games with their friends instead of hanging out with mum and dad in the bar. But but that's nice. Yeah, I do like food. I don't love cooking. So I have a few people in my life who are amazing chefs and hosts. I always love going to their houses and having their amazing food. I'm more of a starter than a pudding person. So I love tapas. So having lots of small dishes. So it's like you can pick up a menu and say, I like all 5 of these. Yes, I shall have all 5. So yeah, I think as a starter, I normally like something with mushrooms. I like seafood. Uh, I like my steak rare. But I like lots of veg as well. I'm not only, I try and be a bit balanced. Is that enough? Seems a lot. Seems a bit boring.
No, no worries. I think it's good to have some icebreaker questions when you get into to talk about something you're passionate about. That's why these questions are there, and it really helps so that people can identify with the writer before they know about the writer. Speaking of your writing, what are some music? What are some music? Wow, my English. So that's what I get for living in Japan for a while and speaking Japanese. So what's some music that inspires you?
Inspires me. Well, part of our bar night, which I mentioned, is I'm slightly born in the wrong era, so I really like 60s and 70s music. That's my kickback, have fun, enjoyment. I don't know, probably inspired by my mum. My mum was a teenager in those decades, and I love the clothes, I love um the kind of culture, I suppose. And not that I experienced it, but the flavor of the culture I can kind of imagine. But when I'm writing, I wouldn't have music on. I find noise a bit distracting. I probably could have classical music on. I do find classical music relaxing. If I'm feeling a bit stressed, having classical music on when I'm driving and stuff helps. But yeah, I'm not one of these people that's like, yeah, I listen to the Foo Fighters and then I've got a new idea for a story. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those.
Yeah. Well, more and more studies are showing that when people multitask, and that's even listening to music, and they do something else, then they're slightly distracted, even classical music. And that surprised me. So I tried writing without music, and I think my writing is clearer. And so I think it's a good call maybe to do it in silence. For years before, though, I was listening to rock, heavy metal rock, or classical while writing. And then
And did the rock influence your writing in a different way than when listening to classical? Do you find you were writing different things, or could you not
oh,
be that
I'm not as violent of a writer. How about you? Classical inspire anything from you when you were writing?
Sorry, say that again.
When you were writing, listening to classical versus not, did you notice a difference?
Uh, I mean, I find I like creative arts in a lot of forms. So as an audience member, even like watching, a film, I'm very much moved by good music at the right point. Thinking one film, for example, might be Gladiator, the
Oh,
classical music that kind of comes in there. Would send me crying straight away. I can hear it, and I think of the film, and I think of the beautiful shots that they've done in that film, and so I think I find music very emotive in the way that I hope my writing at its best would also be emotive. Um, whether there's like you can really connect those inspirational things, I don't know, but I'd say music evokes something in me, and I hope to evoke something in my writing. I think I like creative arts being used for that.
that's great. Speaking of that kind of thing, what sort of places inspire you?
Yeah, I like nature. I've got very into an app at the moment called iNaturalist, which I use my phone to record any species. Basically, it uses AI, which I know sometimes we don't all like AI. We're having to live with it a lot more. But it's one of the ways I really like AI being used, in that it helps identify all sorts of different. I'd say use it for different like insects and spiders and that kind of thing. But it does plants, it does birds. So I found it really fascinating, just finding the flora and fauna around me. It makes me much more observant, because I'm often in a rush, and this app makes me slow down because I'm walking here, there, and everywhere to, pick people up or go to the shops or whatever. And this, like, I need twice as long because I'm stopping and I'm trying to take a picture of the butterfly that I've seen, and then have a look to see if it's a rare one and where else it's been found and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I think I do think place is very important. I think one of the challenges I sometimes have is I listen to talking books a lot because I don't feel I have as much time to read, sit down and read a book. And I find if you walk whilst reading a book, you're at risk of walking into the road or lampposts. So I've switched over to audiobooks so that I can actually concentrate on where I'm going and still and listen to stuff. And I've really got into them. And I use a free app that comes from the library. But then I guess maybe I'm not taking as much notice of place because I'm locked in my little world. But I like being outside. My sister lives in Valencia, in Spain. I love Valencia. I think it's a wonderful place. I love mountains. It's been a long time since I visited mountains, but I always feel very awed by mountains. And I grew up by a river, so I think I quite like water nearby. But yeah, do I have a place? So sometimes there's a novel that I've never managed to get out there, and I've probably never really managed to finish properly. And Valencia was one of the places in it that was going to be one of the places in it. So then sometimes when I've been there visiting my sister, I've been taking photos of quite random things, so that when I come back and think, oh, I'm going to describe something, I know what the shutters of this shop looks like, or I know what, the way people leave their bicycles, and then it gives me ideas for sort of metaphors to move later. So yeah, if I feel inspired by a particular place, I will sometimes snap a few pictures, because then it helps me later to try and describe them when I'm not there anymore and I'm not feeling the sun or smelling the smells or whatever.
Yeah, for me, that answers questions about your writing, like how you can feel like as a reader that you're there when reading your stories. And I think that answers it, is because you actually go there and look at the place and do your research. So yeah, I mean,
yeah, I think that is, I do try. I mean, obviously, if we can always do that, we'd always be setting books in like Hawaii or Tobago and having to do research trips there. So I think sometimes you have to imagine a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think as a starting point, I try and base things on what I know. And then maybe sometimes you go, what if? And obviously science fiction writers have to do that a lot.
Yeah. My trip to Japan actually started because I wanted to find an illustrator and make manga more believable. These books I have manga, and I've been 10 years now. So yeah,
Wow.
wanted to know my place. But about what you said about the app, it sounds great, and how it uses AI. Actually, all of these pictures you're going to see are from these slides are AI. Like this is AI, and then later there's some other ones. But yeah, it's all AI. I think it's a good tool, but if people overuse it, then it's just kind of abuse of it.
Well, I think what's scary, a friend of mine who's a writer, she asked AI to write a poem for her about grief, and just to see what it produced.
Okay.
And a few seconds later, it's produced this poem, and it was surprisingly good. And I think when you're a creative person, whether it's an artist, a photographer, a writer, whatever it happens to be, AI will eventually potentially be your enemy or replace you. That's the sort of fear, I think. But at the moment, and I've got a friend who's a graphic designer, and he's like, I'm using it. I know one day it will replace me, but for now. If I don't use it, I'm at a disadvantage to my competitors who are
Yeah. Well, I'm not
yeah.
really worried about it replacing writers. I think that it's just going to be a tool, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah,
Let-
yeah, yeah.
Let's start talking about writing though. But first, books. With that, what are some books that you like?
Yeah, I suppose I'm a bit eclectic. Classic wise, I did an English degree,
Oh,
and I love Jane Austen. I love um the book The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas.
yeah.
I remember my first week at university, or the first 2 weeks, I think we read Jane Eyre in the first week and we read Train Spotting in the second week. So you sort of sublime to the ridiculous. It was great, and a sort of great experience.
Dynamic.
Um, but what I've read, some of the things I've sort of loved recently, I'm in a book club, and one of our favourites that really, really sad was A Terrible Kindness. I think I just grab it.
A
I
terrible.
Jo Browning Rowe, she so
Oh,
it's really nice because it's her first book, and she's I think I think she'd be okay with me saying she's a more elderly lady. But yeah, I mean, it's really very, very sad. I do like tragedy in a book. If a book makes me cry, I normally find that I like it
mm,
more than if it doesn't.
mm.
Um, Probably the book I finished most recently is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I think that won, don't I don't know if it was Booker, it won something a few years ago. But one of the she's not a narrator, but kind of it's a close third person telling. It jumps between two main characters, and she's blind, so all of the description is really beautiful because it's told by somebody who can't see. So when you're describing places and situations and experiences,
Mm.
I think that's really clever. I think if I'm ever teaching or doing a writing workshop with anyone, I think that's something that I would definitely encourage. Okay, imagine a scene, imagine your setting, and now explain it through the eyes of somebody who's blind, because I think it really brings out some deeper ways of having to do description. So
Oh,
yeah, a bit more fun. What have I read recently? Lessons in Chemistry I enjoyed. And then there's a lovely one about an octopus, which I think I've got. Yeah, Remarkably Bright Creatures is another
one
lovely.
more time.
Sorry,
What was that title? The last one?
Remarkably. I'll grab it. Remarkably Bright Creatures.
Oh, okay.
And it's quite a soft read for me. I quite like heavy books. The Book Thief is a favorite of mine. Yeah, I
If
could just go on. I love books.
if your goal is to cry, you ought to read The Traveling Cat Chronicles. I just
Oh, okay, yeah.
the Japanese writer Hiro Arikawa. It's about a cat who basically its life gets saved by someone who's really kind, and
Oh,
then it's from the cat's perspective. And I think if you want to cry, yeah, read that book.
okay, yeah. No, I do. I always like a book that makes me cry.
The traveling.
We did read one Japanese one. Oh, it got very mixed reviews by my little reading group. And I feel like it had a cat on the front, but it wasn't that one. John Walker Whiskey, like the character John Walker from John Walker Whiskey was a character.
Hmm,
No, I can't remember. It's gone. It was quite a chunky tome, but it was quite weird.
no worries. Yeah, I'm not sure with that one either. Um, but you mentioned writer circles. So are you part of any writer groups? Writer
Yeah,
workshops?
so I think for me being part of a writer group definitely has been crucial at points in my writing journey. I so I went to one at my local library, and we pay £1 to hire the room, and we sit and chat, and we share our writing. What I found is because it was a daytime group, so I think I probably started going there, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, and a lot of the people who were there were retired. Some of them there's a real mix of kind of talent and why people are there. So I think some people are there because they're quite lonely and it's a nice place to meet people and chat. But some people very gifted writers, poets, and I'd say probably there's a core of maybe 20 of us, but probably 15 gather each week. And it's quite mixed because not everybody's serious about their writing.
Yeah.
You get people that don't want feedback unless it's that was nice.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of had to manage that a little bit. But I've not actually been going regularly for probably about 4 or 5 years because I got more of a proper job, and it's like it clashes because it's in the daytime when the writing group meets. Occasionally I've managed to get across, but I'd still kind of friends with some of the people from the group.
Oh.
And for me, it's discipline. My self-discipline has just been that. I'd say that's one of the biggest barriers to writing and finishing, and is I'm not great at self-discipline. Terrible procrastinator, and I like my job, so it's kind of nice to get paid for the time I'm giving, and I do communications at work, so there is an element of writing that I am doing, so hopefully I'm still kind of being a bit polished. But being part of a writing group, I wouldn't let myself go if I hadn't written anything new that week. So it was like, you have to have something fresh to read here, even if it's a 100-word story. I never did as small as a 42-word story until your project, Bam. But so that I would think even, and write it that morning or whatever. But it's got to be, you can't turn up with nothing. Like some people would, and that's fine. That wasn't a rule of the group. It was just my rule for myself. And having that accountability and having to read something out and wanting to read something out that I was proud enough of to have out there made me a little bit more and in a way that was what started me submitting microfiction and short fiction to journals and things, because I hadn't really done that. I was trying to write a novel, and as most writers I think will tell you, that you get a lot of rejections when you start out sending novel pictures and trying to get an agent and all that journey. So I'd sort of given up because novels are years worth of work, and if the novel is never going to be good enough, that's a lot of time that you've given. Whereas writing something short for a writers group, that 1,000 words, 500 words, if that piece never makes it, it's not years of your life. And I think that was helpful to me, thinking, okay, well, I like this story, and I've sent it out and no one else seems to, but I also like the story I've written the next week. So I'll send that out and see what happens. And then, I was starting to get people going, oh, yeah, we'll publish that. Yeah, we'll give you whatever it was, 25 Canadian dollars or for that story. So that's, I think, again, I probably wouldn't have had my work published and paid for had I not been doing the short stuff that I was doing for the writing group. It's a depth for me, big encouragement.
Yeah, it sounds like a great motivator. What's your writer circle like?
So I don't think I have one. Like, is a writer's circle would be other writers and we're like emailing stuff to each other to read our stuff. Is that?
No, but it could be different for everybody. For me, I have a friend I message on Facebook, a couple of them who are both writers, and we've been just chatting for 20 years. And we just kind of
Yeah,
go
I sort of briefly joined one with a guy I knew from my writing group, and another one of his friends, and they were both writers. And the guy from my writing group, he's sadly passed away now, but he used to write a lot of cowboy and western books, and he'd churn them out. There would be like 3 a year, and they published them mainly for libraries, hardback copies that would go out. So he was prolific, but unfortunately for me, it didn't end up being a good fit, because I would spend all the time I had that week reading and giving him comments. And I'm quite a tight reader. I'm not very good at the sort of general gist. I'm more, I would rewrite that sentence this way, or I would, I'm like a tight sort of editor, if you like. And I'd find I'd spend all my time doing his, and then I wouldn't have any time to do my own writing.
Yeah.
But he was retired, and writing, hours every day, and I was juggling a young family and work and stuff. So that didn't, like, it was nice to be part of briefly, but I mean, I'm still friends with some of the writers. There's one of them from my group I meet up with quite regularly. We don't always talk about writing, but I know that we can, and we do sometimes, and talk about what we're reading. And it's very, I'm in a book club that I do still regularly attend,
Oh,
and quite a lot of what we read makes me think about what we write. And she's in the book club as well, so we do sort of talk a little bit about writing. And she's written, she's self-published, I think three books. She had a little bit of a break from writing. She does all sorts of other things as well. But yeah, I think it does help to have other people who get you. But I'd say I don't have a tight writer circle. I think if I started writing novel again, there probably are people that I could send stuff to and say, what do you think? Well, I mean, I have actually been published as a ghostwriter for a couple of titles
yeah.
a long time ago, like 15 years ago. And I used to send them actually to my dad, my dad is the grammar police.
Okay.
So he didn't give that much comment on content, but he was so good at, like, I think you need a semicolon here. Have you thought about the Oxford comma at this moment?
Those are the best,
Yeah,
the circle
but
people.
that's right. And and there was another friend that I used to send it to, and all she really did was say, "Oh, it's really good." And it's really nice to have someone who just says that, even though it doesn't necessarily make it better, because sometimes when your self-esteem is not feeling high,
Yeah.
just have someone who goes, "Yeah, that's really good." But yeah, I think I have gravitated to that. I think when I do ask for comment on my writing, on my work, I really want it to be want the work to matter more than my ego. So if I feel a little bit crushed by the comments I get back, that's okay, because I want the work to be as good as it can. And I didn't used to feel like that. I think in my 20s, I found that harder.
Well, that's good that you found a way to grow from that experience, or just experiencing being a writer, I guess. But you mentioned something earlier when we were talking about chocolate, and I'd like to kind of go farther into that. But with your writing, is there something in the world that you wish the human race would stop doing, and maybe that appears in your writing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, especially that the theme of slavery appears in my writing, but I think injustice does.
Mm.
Um, I say quite a lot of I mean, and you probably see it. It's funny to have a story in the romance section that's essentially about cannibalism. There's a bit of a darkness there.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of my the people that read my stuff, my friends at the writers group and things, would say, "Oh yes, we often expect something dark from you," and I think it's about shining a light on dark things. I absolutely hate injustice. So whilst the way I kind of clarify that in the way I try and shop, so like all my clothes, for example, are secondhand or fair trade, because I don't want to support slavery and buying clothes. I again try and do the same with food and that sort of thing. I'm mindful that although I'll never meet the person that stitched my shirt, I want to make sure that they got fair price, that they weren't in forced labour. So I mean, one of the writers I love, I didn't mention her earlier, is Margaret Atwood. I think she does that really well. Is she shines a light on, and her books are uncomfortable to read, but I love that because they're saying something, they're challenging. So interestingly, I looked at some of the key themes in novels and things that I'd written before, and they were around illness and health issues, which I I don't think that is something in my head necessarily, but sometimes it does come out in my writing. And I think maybe giving victims the last word is probably something that you do see in my stories.
Mm.
We had a poem recently, probably in the last year in my writing group I did manage to turn up for, and the theme was black and blue, and I just got a little line in my head about, okay, can't remember what it was now, but it was a rhyming poem and a rhyming couplet about being black and blue. And I did it from a domestic violent point of view. And right near the end, you got the sense that she was going to kill herself. Mm. And actually, in the end, she plunged the knife into the aggressor. And I quite like the turn of those things, because it felt like it was building up to a suicide, and it wasn't. It was something. So yeah, sort of trying to give back a little power to the powerless and readdress some of the injustices.
Yeah.
But I think, sorry.
Oh, I just said that's uplifting.
I hope it's uplifting. I mean, I think sometimes I do leave the stories in a negative place and maybe have done that too much. But the reason is because I want people to go, that's just not right. It can't end this way, because you want to provoke a reader to think this isn't okay. I want to be disturbed by this, because it might make me act differently. It might make me care about something I've never thought about before.
Well, you have this victim who takes charge finally and plunges a knife into the aggressor, and that's not something negative. That's something that should happen.
No, and like the final line of the poem has something about the lights that flash were blue and blue. So everything had been black and blue until that point, but then obviously the sirens are coming, but yeah. She's there owning it. Okay. Not sure what's going to happen next, but it's going to be messy. But yeah, this part is over. This bad bit's over.
Okay, but about that, you've worked hard on your stories. So why don't you talk a little about how you deal with rejection and acceptance as well?
Yeah, I think realizing how saturated, how many people want to be a writer, so how many people want to be an actor, it's or a famous musician or whatever. It's not an easy thing. You have to be quite resilient, and I don't think I was terribly resilient. I took things very personally, and I think any negative comment on my writing I used to take as a comment on myself. So I had to readdress that, and I think it's taken quite a long time. And I think being part of a writing group where you're sharing, you realize some people don't want constructive criticism, but some do. And then with those people, you can make suggestions for them framed in a constructive way, and then they can to you, and some of those suggestions you look at and you go, okay, that's an opinion, and I think I still like it this way. But yeah, that what they've said has merit. I how can I make that better? And I think I've mentioned it before. I'd rather be published and it be something I'm proud of than sit here with my ego completely intact and not have those things. So I think it became a little bit of a game in a way. I used I think it's a free software called the Submission Grinder. And I don't know if you've come across the Submission Grinder, but and again, I've not used it for a while, but it was quite a nice. It's not sophisticated and it's not pretty shiny facing, but it's got a lot of information in it about what journals accept somebody without an agent sending stuff in, and they were really they kind of, I guess, they grind all this data. People say when they hear back, and whether it was a negative or whether it was a rewrite or whatever it was. And they do like little graphs of how long you might expect to wait to hear and whether you can send simultaneous submissions. So I, whenever I'd done a story that I really liked, I just started sending it, and keeping my data in this grinder and send it out. If it had to be, like, there are particular journals that you heard back from really quickly, but they didn't accept simultaneous submissions, I'd often send to them first, and then I'd expect my rejection within a week, and then I'd think, okay, now I can send it to the other 6 that I've got lined up. So I just played it like that, really, and didn't worry too much about, getting the yes, we want it was a bonus. And I think I worked out I probably, I don't know, for every 20, 25 things I sent out, I think I got an acceptance somewhere. And so when you start like thinking about those numbers, you go, okay, I'm not going to, if I start expecting an acceptance for everything, I'm going to be sadly disappointed.
Yeah.
So it kind of just became a bit of a habit. Okay, I've written a story and I really, I think this is a good one. I've edited it a few times. It stood the test of my writers group. I'm going to submit it, and then I'm going to kind of forget about it, and then maybe I hear back. And so yeah, that I think, but that it's definitely been a change. I think when as an early writer, sort of early 20s, I did a creative writing module as part of my degree, my English degree.
Oh.
And I remember submitting essays. We used to think, did we do it electronically then? Maybe not. I'm a bit old. I think maybe we did do it on paper still. But you'd submit you had to do it a particular date, otherwise you'd lose marks and things.
Mhm.
And I remember when I submitted my first story, I felt sick. And I was like, I never felt like this with an essay. Why do I care so much more about this story? And I think there is this element that you're expecting, I don't know, something of yourself. There's a real vulnerability to sharing that story. And I think, like with all these things, the more you do it, the more you go, okay, here it is again.
Yeah. It sounds a lot like an outlining process for you, the rejection and acceptance process. And it goes
Yeah,
in.
maybe. Yeah. I've gone off social media a little bit. I think I used to try
Oh,
and use it a little bit more to promote myself.
okay.
But so when I was, when I got a story accepted, it was like a nice place to go, look, I've just, I had a really good email week today. I've had 2 acceptances this week and things. But I'm not very good at that anymore. But then I'm not sending as much stuff out anymore either. So I think this story's probably been my most recent one to be accepted, because I haven't been sending things for probably a few years, really, since I've been doing my proper job.
If it helps, I decided to not submit anything until the anthology was published. And it was
Okay.
a thing I did because I went, I'm not gonna let myself be happy until these writers are happy, with
Oh,
publications. But I was still getting people emailing me saying, will you send us something? And I went, okay. So I had to send stuff to people who requested it, but otherwise I didn't. And so
nice position to be in, for people requesting your stuff. Great.
short stories though, but yeah, it's something. But
Yeah.
you get to that point when you do that, like you're saying, where you submit 25 things here. And what I would do is I would send, if I had a story, I would send it somewhere. If it was rejected, I'd read it, have it through a circle, then rewrite, and then send it out somewhere. And I had a rule where it wouldn't sit somewhere. I have an Excel file to keep it all organized. And so I just keep sending stuff. And eventually that led to people emailing me and saying, can you send us stories? And when they're emailing you, then you know that your name's getting out there. And
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah.
it was only short stories. None of it was ever for a book. That'd be great, right?
Nice. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I think certainly at the moment, short stories are probably all I'm managing. This is, like I say, this is the shortest one I have written.
it's a good start. Not this, but I mean, this even would be a great start. I think a few writers did start this way through the
Mm.
anthology. And they said
Mm.
it led to like a domino effect where they were published by more places. But yeah, even 42 words can be a good start. It's kind of
Yeah.
like prompt idea, and then you keep going with it. Where can people find you, by the way, on social media? You mentioned that.
Yeah, like I say, I probably should revisit it, really. But I mean, if you Google Lindy Greaves, you'll find me. I'm I'm I think I am the first Lindy Greaves that pops up when you have a look. So I do have a writing Facebook page, but I probably haven't put anything on it for a very long time. And Goodreads, I've got a author profile on Goodreads. Um,
Yeah, I'm following you on it.
that's nice. Thanks. Are you on there as well?
Yeah. But
Okay. Oh,
I'll also put a link to some of your books in the blog version of this interview.
yeah. Thank you. I mean, they're out of print now, so it will probably be old copies that I don't. I'm not sure if they're new copies anymore. But there's a couple of short story links as well, I think, that I sent you.
Yeah.
Um, I've got some lovely ones that are printed in magazines, but they're not so easy to share because they're not online. But
Well, the future will tell. I'd like to thank you and yeah, thank you.
oh yeah, well, thanks very much. It was fun. It's nice to hopefully inspire me to do a little bit more creative.
Great. Okay. Have a good one.
Thanks, Bam.